Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Kuf Gimel. We are at the Mishnah near the bottom of Kuf Bet Amabet. Of course, we are in the middle of the second perek of Bava Basra, and we are dealing with the issue of making sure to distance the things you do, even in your own property, so as not to cause damage to somebody else's property. And so we're continuing that discussion, and the Mishnah notes that one must even distance items that could eventually lead to damage. That's the first category. Marchikin es hasulam min hashovach arba amos. That we need to separate any ladders that we set up from the dovecote of our neighbor by at least 4 amos, kedei shelo tikbots hanemiya, so that the marten, a marten is a kind part of the weasel family. Looks a lot like a fox, from my opinion, and my unlearned opinion in terms of what animals look like. But in any event, yes, that is a Bava Basra. And this is for you on your trip. The issue is that they will jump, tikpots. They will jump from the ladder into presumably the dovecote, and we don't even want to think about what would happen next. So as a result, as Rashi says, this last Rashi in the Mishnah, 1, 2, 3, end of the fourth wide line in Rashi at the bottom, Kedei shelo tikbot hanemiya, min hasulam, from the ladder, l'shovach, into the dovecote, and the tarogas hayonim, and the marten will kill all of the doves. V'hi chaya katana. And what is a marten? It's this small animal that again, it looks part of the weasel family, but I actually thought it was much more adorable than your typical. When I think of a weasel, I don't think of an adorable animal. When you look up marten on the internet, it's a much more adorable fox-like looking creature. But in any event, notwithstanding its adorableness, we don't want it to kill our neighbors' doves. Arba amos. And we saw this at the end of the day yesterday. We also have to distance 4 amos, any wall that we were to make near our neighbor's house, 4 amos from the gutter, in order for him to have room to put up a ladder. And so that is an important element as well. Okay, so lemas nisnisin delok Rabbi Yossi, because we'll remember that we have this machlokas between Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanan. Rabbi Yossi says that pretty much you can do whatever you want in your own property. It's on the one who is being damaged to move his item that will be damaged away from the ramifications of your action. And yet here, you are required to move your ladder away from the dovecote, even though that doesn't cause damage. What's causing damage is the nimiyah that will jump onto your ladder, go climb up the ladder, jump into the dovecote, and then do damage. That has nothing to do with you. Why should you have to do anything to protect it? So that's why the Gemara asks, Lema masnisun delok Rabbi Yossi. Di Rabbi Yossi ha'amar zecho for b'to shelo, zecho notea b'to shelo. That everybody can do what they want in their own property. This one can dig his hole, and that one could plant his tree, and even and the implication is, even if it turns out that the roots are now in the other person's property, and you're going to cut the roots to make your hole, or the roots are going to go from the person's property into the next person's property and ruin the person's hole. Oh, tough luck. That's if you want to avoid being damaged by indirect things that happen from my property, that's on you to protect yourself. So no, the Gemara says afilu tema Reb Yossi. We can even say it's Reb Yossi. Ha'amar Rav Ashi, because we have Rav Ashi's statement. Ki avinan be Rav Kahana hava amar. When we were at Rav Kahana's yeshiva, he would say, Modi Rabbi Yossi begire didei, that Rabbi Yossi agrees when it's your arrow. If you shoot the arrow from your property, well, that's kind of different, right? I mean, we can understand why Rav Yossi would say, you can't shoot an arrow into yes, the shooting of the arrow was in your property, but you knew when you shot the arrow that it was going to go into your neighbor's property. You can't shoot an arrow into your neighbor's property. And this is considered shooting an arrow. So hachanami, zimnin, because there are going to be times that when he puts the ladder up against it, so right, he rests the ladder, Yasva Bechor Bekafza. You're going to have the marten is going to be sitting in its hole and jumping, and it's going to jump at the opportunity to get into the dovecote. Bahagramahu. Well, 1 second, isn't this a case of grama? So Amarav Tuvi Bar Masna Zosomeres Grama Benazikin Aser. So isn't this a case of grama? And we have a general principle throughout Shas that grama is not something that you are obligated to pay damages for. And the Gemara is answering, not that you're obligated to pay damages. The Gemara is answering that when it comes to grama, even that you can't do it lichatchila. So yes, you're not going to be liable for the damages associated with it. And grama means an indirect action that causes damage. So I'm gonna go through outside. We're not gonna go through the Tosos, the bottom Tosos Kaf Bet Bet. But let's take a look at Rashi first. Grama benizikin aser va'afil laman de amar delo da indini de garmi. Even according to the one. Now there's two categories. There's grama, which is an indirect action, and garmi, also an indirect action. I'm gonna list for you a whole bunch of each category, and I don't know that we're going to go through and try and figure out where they go, but I'll give you also the three answers as to how we differentiate these categories. Not two of the answers are definitely not perfect. One answer is perfect but unsatisfactory, so we'll go through those three answers. But the bottom line is garmi is something that's somehow worse than grama, because there's a machlokus about garmi. That when it comes to garmi, some people say that you're liable associated with garmi, and some people say that you're not liable associated with garmi. So again, we're going to say what those categories are. But in any ways, Rashi is saying that even according to the one who says that you're not liable for garmi, upater milashalem, and you're exempt from paying, asur ligrom, it's still prohibited to do so lechatchila, because sheba lahamid grama lahazik chavero ma'akev. And when you come to do something that is going to cause a grama, an indirect damage to your neighbor, your neighbor has the ability to stop you. They have the ability to tell you not to do it. So that's Rashi. So Tosos, there is an element, although you don't have to read it that way, an element of Rashi that seems to be combining grama and garmi. But let's go through, and I'm going to tell you in Tosos what Tosos cites a whole bunch of different examples. Grama, you're not liable, and then garmi, there's a machlokas. So let's go.
It would stop you from doing the action,
but if you did the action and the bad thing came about, you would not be liable for it. We saw often that these were things where you're not liable be day adam in a human court, but you are bishamayim. So again, it's not to say that you should think, oh, I can get away with it. This is wrong. This is a sin. And just like most sins, you don't get punished in a human court, so too here as well. So let's give an example. So
the court even stop you?
So the court will stop you from doing it, but it won't cause you to pay if it happens. Okay, so here are examples. What if you remove a cushion so that now when somebody threw something out and it was supposed to land on the cushion, they thought the cushion was there. In fact, maybe they even threw it while the cushion was there and you pulled it away. So now the piece comes down, crashes into the ground, and breaks. Grumma. That's grumma, not garmi. Okay. You put bad food or even poison in front of an animal, and then the animal chooses to eat it. And so that the damage that causes to the animal. You give a fire to a minor or to somebody who's a deaf mute or somebody who's insane, and then that fire goes and burns your neighbor's house. You break a fence in front of your neighbor's animal, and now the animal runs away. You lean a a stalk. You like bend over a stalk of wheat or grains or whatever, branch, and now because you did that, the fire comes by, catches onto the what you bent over. If you hadn't bent it over, it wouldn't have caught on, and now it burns a whole thing down. You do work with mechatas. Mechatas is the para aduma water, and because you can't do any work with it, if you do any work with it, it becomes invalid. So now you've invalidated it. That is one of those examples of something where you can't see the damage, and we say that you're not liable for that. Similarly, if you work a para aduma animal itself, you'd have the same situation. You have if you have a flame in your property and the wind comes and blows it from your property into somebody else's property, if you scare someone, and if you incite a dog or a snake to attack someone, all of those Tosfos categorizes as grumma. In terms of garmi, we have the following examples. What happens? You're a money changer. Somebody comes to you and asks you to validate a dollar bill, and you validate it. They therefore accept it as payment, and it turns out to be no good. No good, exactly. So that would be garmi. You incorrectly decide a legal case. They come to you to decide a case, and you incorrectly decide it. You burn someone's contract. That's probably the most classic case of garmi. So James owes you $100. You have a check or an IOU, something that says very clearly that it is effectively worth the proof that James owes it to you, and I come and I take it and I burn it. Now that all that document was worth was a couple of pennies, but because of the writing on the document, it was worth a lot to you. So that, again, another case of garmi. If James owes me $100, and then I sell you that debt, I still have the right to forgive it. Remarkably, it's a remarkable thing. Even though I sold it to you, I still have the right. So, and now after selling it to you, I forgive it. So that also is a case of garmi. So again, I caused you $100 of damage because you bought it from me, and you expected to be able to collect it. If a fence, we saw this relatively recently. If a fence falls between a kerem, a vineyard, and a grain field, and that fence is what's stopping there from being klei kerem, from being klayim. So then, and I'm the owner of the vineyard, and you tell me you got to fix the fence, and I fix the fence, and then it falls down again, and you tell me you've got to fix the fence, and I don't fix the fence. That's the case of garmi, that I've effectively caused you damage because now your grain is pasul. Of course, my grapes are also, but I've caused you damage. So those are the different categories. So that now that we've gone through them, so we got three different explanations. So Rabbeinu Yitzchak says garmi is where you yourself did the damage, that there's on some level a more direct aspect. A second possibility is a timing concern, where grama is less immediate than garmi. And then the third is that actually, what is it that we're really afraid of? And if we're really afraid that somebody's going to go out of their way and do the item, then we'll call it under garmi and we'll prohibit it and make you pay. But if not, it's basically a kanas, and that's what the Ritzbah says in Tosa. So all right, so I wanted to go through that because I thought it's such an interesting issue. I'm sorry that we can't get into further detail, but that's the idea. So the point is that our Mishnah can even be like Rabbi Yossi, who allows you to do your actions in your own place. And here he's going to stop you. And when we say we're stopping you, note that it means that we're only stopping you from doing it, but they're not that you're necessarily going to be liable for any damage. Okay, so Rav Yosef Havale Hanu Ta'ale Dahavu. So he had some Dahavu, as we continue, Dahavu Asu Umane V'yasve Tusaihu. That he Rav Yosef had.
Well, what is the general? You gave a lot of examples of grama and garmi, but what is the general principle?
I just gave you three potential general principles. Again, none of them are perfect. One general principle is garmi is where you yourself did the damage. The second is the possibility, and none of them fit perfectly. And that's what the Rishonim, Achronim spend a lot of time trying to categorize things. The second is that grama is less immediate than garmi. And the third is not focused on the action itself, but rather on the likelihood, and therefore when we say garmi, it's something that we view as more likely to happen and therefore worthy of being punished as a knas, as some kind of fine, so that you don't do it. Whereas the other things are so unlikely that, yes, okay, you're not going to be liable, but it's going to be prohibited to take the action. So those are three possible. There are, I'm sure, others in the Rishonim, but those are the three that are dealt with in the Tosfos on the bottom of Kaf Bet Amud Bet.
Enough means you get a fine for grama, but not garmi.
Fine for garmi, but nothing for grama, because no liability for grama. Potential machlokas about liability for garmi, and there'd be machlokas. The machlokas, according to the Ritzbah, is do we impose this fine or do we not impose this fine? That's the machlokas. Okay, so we have Rav Yosef with some palm trees, some date palm trees, and asu umane v'yasve tusayu, and these bloodletters are coming and they're sitting underneath it. And Rashi, Tosfos, explains that the bekarka shelahen hayoshvin, they're sitting in their own property. They're not sitting because that's why it's related to our Mishnah. Everybody is acting in their own property. V'asu orve achle dama, and then some ravens that eat blood would come. Visalki abe tale umasade tamre, and they would then go up they'd fly up to the palm tree, and they would ruin the dates. I think the simplest to understand that the blood would get all over the dates, and nobody wants to have that. Okay, so Amar lahu Rav Yosef said to them, Apiku likarkor mehacha.
Dates are up in the tree.
Uh-huh.
The
bloodletters are on the bottom. The ravens drink the blood, and they step all their in the blood.
Attracted to that area because the bloodletters are there. Then they just eat the dates.
No. They're attracted to the blood. That's the issue, is that they eat the blood, or drinking the blood, and then they fly up. It's kind of gross. Okay, definitely little Dracula with the black. If instead of ravens we said they were bats, it would really be something. Okay, in any event. All right, so Amrle Rav Yosef says, Apikuli kurkor mehacha. So this is an example of an automatopoeia, right? Kurkor, Rashi says, Oravim, that those are the ravens, Shedomim b'tzakatam kirkorin kurkor, right? That right, if you go kurkor, right? So you had the sound of a raven, and that's how that's why he's calling it that. So he's saying, get rid of this of these ravens from me. So Amarle Abaye said, V'hagramahu. I don't understand. It's grama, so there's no liability associated with that. So, and therefore maybe there would also be no prevention. So but Amrle, Rav Yosef responded, Hachi Amar Rav Tuvi Bar Masna Zozo Maris Grama Benazikin Usher. As we saw in our Mishnah, that we learned that Grama Benazikin is prohibited. Lahu, but 1 second, but maybe they have a chazaka. So Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Bar Rav Hua Ein chazaka l'nazikin. We don't have a chazaka for nazikin. V'lavin Mar Allah. 1 second. But and in fact, what are the exceptions? So again, Rav Yosef says 1 second, you're not allowed to have a chazaka for nazikin, and Rabbi responds, "Oh, v'lav itmar Allah." Rav Mari Amar Bekutra, Rav Zvid Amar Bevesa Kisei. 1 second, when we say that there's no chazaka, that is only when it comes to really terrible things like smoke or an outhouse. Those are the only situations where that would be a problem. And so as a result, how can you say, Rav Yosef, that they don't get a chazaka? So Amrle, Hani l'didi, da'anina da'atai, kikutra, ubeitakise damuli. That when it comes to me, who's a very delicate person, I'm a very sensitive person, so as a result, this is like smoke and an outhouse. Okay, so now that brings us to the next Mishnah, and the next Mishnah, again, now limits the location of dovecotes. So, Marchikin es
Well, what is the concept here? Chazaka usually means something that happens 2-3 times, right? 3 times.
correct, that these bloodletters had sat there for some amount of time, and so as a result, maybe they should have a chazaka and be allowed to continue there. And so Rav Yosef is teaching us that when it comes to somebody who's extremely sensitive, that you cannot, even if they allow you to potentially do something, if that item is very painful for them, we will not give you the chazaka over having done it 3 times. That's not going to be sufficient for you to be able to continue doing it. Okay, so marchiken es hashovach min ha'ir chamishim ama. You have to keep, again, this is again with the concept of avoiding the things that are in your property doing damage to things outside your property. So you need to distance your dovecote from a city 50 amos, because if the dovecote is within that distance, so it will fly into the city and it will eat from the grains that are within the 50 amos of the dovecote. Below yasa adam shovo beto shalo ela im ken yesh lo chamishim amo l'chol ruach. And when you talk about somebody who's outside a city, in a vast field, again, you should only make the shovach when you have at least 50 amos in every direction. So let's take a look at Tosos here. Ein chazak. I'm sorry. Below yaseh shovach toshalo. It's the one. It's a Tosos near the very bottom of the next to the bottom line in the Gemara. Berichuk min ha'ir bein asados. That we're talking about a situation where it's far away from the fields and far away from the city, and it's in the fields, among the fields. And Tosfos explains we actually need to teach us both rules. We need to teach that you need to be 50 amos away from a city, and you need to be 50 amos away from your neighbor. Because if you were to only tell me about having to be 50 amos from the city, hasam dafka marchik mibnei shetevuos ha'ir megulos ben hein bechatzer hein begag. Because when you have the grains outside in a city, they will be out in the open, because you're not worried about wild animals or anything associated with that. So as a result, these ravens will come, the doves will come and fly in, and they'll take it from you if it's within 50 amos. But aval tavua bin hanizrat besada. But when it comes to grains that are planted in the field, we're talking about the seeds now, and so the seeds are going to be covered. They'll be covered. Ain sarach laharkik. Maybe you wouldn't need to make a distance. And ve'itan aseifa mishum disbesados. And if we just learn the end of it, in connection with the fields, there, it's much more common to have the various grains. Maybe you wouldn't say that they can't put the shovach within 50 amos of the city. So therefore, we need both the first statement and the second statement in our Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Bein Beis Arbas Korin, Melo Sheger Hayona, that we need to actually give more space, that you need to give the amount of a dove's flight, and a dove will flight 4 core, 1 core in every direction. And the note here calculates it for us, that basically that is going to be roughly, how much should we say? 274 amos. So about 5.5 times in every direction what we were going to say when we had 50 amos. The im lakacho, and if you purchase the dovecote, afilu beis rova, then even if the entire property is only the area of a quarter kav, which is, basically a little over 10 amot, so then you would harehu b'chazkaso. Then you already have a chazaka of the dovecote, and you'd be able to keep it there. So chamishin amma v'sulo, I don't understand. Are you telling me that the doves don't fly further? The Gemara wants to know. Or aminu, I'll show you that they do. Ein porsin nishbin leonim, that you can't set out traps for doves. Elaim kain hayarachok min hayishuv shloshim ris, unless you're at least 30 ris. 30 ris is 8,000 amos. So how can you possibly say that that all the doves going to go is 50 amos? You have to, when it comes to potentially stealing somebody else's doves, you need to make sure that you're 8,000 amos away from them. So Amar Abaye, Mishat Shaita Tuve. Yes, they do fly further, but Uchrasuya b'chamishim amsa milya. But they fill their tummy within the first 50 amos. So as a result, when it comes to being concerned about your neighbor's food, so then you only have to worry about 50 amos. When it comes to being concerned about stealing your neighbor's bird, well, then you have to worry about 8,000 amos. Umeshat shloshim ris the sulo. Well, 1 second. How can you say that all they fly is 8,000 amos? Vahatanya, we have another brisa. Ubeyishuv, in an area that there are settlements. So then afilu meya mil lo yifros. You can't even set out a trap within 100 mil. Of course, 100 mil is 3 1/3 times. 100 mil. A ris is equal to 4 mil. 30 ris is equal to 4 mil. So 100 is equal to 25 times 30. So I can't do the math in my head that quickly. But what is it? 75. Oh, I guess 750. So 750 ris is how much it would need to be. So that's obviously a lot more. So let's see. So what do we say about that? So Rav Yosef Amar B'Yishuv Kramim. So Rav Yosef says that that's talking about where there's settlements with vineyards, meaning that there's a vineyard all along the way. And so as a result, only in that situation do you have to be careful about not setting out traps. Because again, the birds will go longer when they have a lot of food along their way. And Rava Amar B'Yishuv Shochim. No, Rava says it's not about the vineyards and the food, but it's about a place to really rest and consider their home. And if they have a lot of dovecotes along the way, where there are essentially nests that are welcoming to them, well, then you would have to worry about 100 mil. Now, 1 second, but of course, if there are no vineyards or dovecotes along the way, so then 30 ris is the limit. Well, 1 second. Why, when you said that if according to Rava, you said that when it's settled in a place, you can't be within 100 mil of the original dovecote, but what about all the other dovecotes that are between the original dovecote and this dovecote and your trap? How can you set up your trap within 30 ris of the other dovecotes? meaning that those other dovecotes should present a problem. But tepuk le mishum shovchen gufayhu, so you should stop it because of the other dovecotes, meaning why don't the closer dovecotes, which are what enables the bird to reach this point, why don't they stop you from setting up a trap? So you can either say that maybe these dovecotes belong to the guy who's setting up the trap, or you could say that they belong to somebody who's not Jewish. And again, even though this is and because that when it comes to grama, this works particularly well according to the Ritzbah. If we say that it's that this is just something that we are setting up because we want to prevent this kind of damage. So then this is, when it comes to a non-Jew, we're not going to be concerned about it. It's not a direct damage, meaning you can't go ahead and steal a Canaanite's bird directly. But if you set up a trap in a place where it might catch that Canaanite's bird, so you're allowed to do it. V'bayzema dehefker, or these are unowned dovecotes, so as a result, it's not going to factor into the calculation at all. Okay, so that ends our discussion of.
What is the scenario here that you have a dovecote and then 30 mil away, there's another neighbor has a dovecote and so on and so on?
So let's go. Yeah. So you are setting the trap. Okay. And the question is, you're not allowed to set a trap within 30 ris, 100 mil, 30 ris, 8,000 amos, 4 mil of a dovecote, okay, of a place where there are dovecotes. So now, but we have another brisa that says you can't set it out even within 100 mil of a dovecote, meaning 750 ris away. And so we explain, according to Rav Yosef, it's talking about where there are lots of vineyards. So there's no problem in that situation in understanding the situation. But according to Rava, the situation is the reason that it's considered a settled area, and therefore you need to have 100 mil away from the original dovecote. The reason that you need to do that is because there are lots of dovecotes in between the original dovecote and your trap. And so the question then is, well, if there are lots of dovecotes between them, don't each of those other dovecotes deserve 30 ris of protection? And well, or potentially 100 if you consider it a settled area. And the answer is that no, we're going to say either those dovecotes belong to the trapper, or they belong to a non-Jew, or they're ownerless, and therefore they don't create an obligation on you to distance yourself from them. Okay.
So there's an overlap then, right? There's 30.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an overlap, but the point is that I don't need to worry about those other dovecotes because, again, they either belong to me, or I mean to you, or they belong to a non-Jew, or they're ownerless, and so as a result, you don't have to worry about them. You don't have to distance yourself from them. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda Omer Beis Arbaz Koren. Rabbi Yehuda said that there was a larger space. Amar of Papa v'itema Rav Zvid Zos Omeris. Toanin lokeach. Now, the end of Rabbi Yehuda's statement said that if in fact a buyer would have bought something, we're going to rely on this fact that we assume that that the seller had a chazakah. And so effectively, this Mishnah is teaching us that we make a claim on behalf of a purchaser. V'toan and liorish, and similarly, that assuming that there's an inheritance of such a dovecote, we also give that inheritance a similar claim. So Yorish, so now the Gemara wonders, Yorish Tanina, we already have a claim, a Mishnah that tells us about the fact that we'll make a claim on behalf of somebody who inherits something, because Haba Mishum Yerusha, that somebody who has an inheritance, Eino Tzarak Taina. When it comes to making a chazaka claim, they can make a chazaka claim without actually explaining why and how they got the chazaka. All they need to do is say that they've been there for the necessary time. Lokeach itzruchalei. So therefore, why do we need to even teach us this in this Mishnah? So the Gemara answers, no, well, it's teaching us this principle for a purchaser. And of course, that's the explicit case in our Mishnah. Well, okay, Tanina. We have another Mishnah that says that a purchaser will make an argument for them that they have a chazaka. Laka chatzar uba zizin ugzuz traos. And if somebody bought a chutzner, a courtyard, and it's got ledges and balconies, harezo b'chezkasa, all the ledges and balconies that are sticking out into the Rishos Harabim, you are considered as if they have a chazaka, and you don't need permission. Utsricha. So actually, it turns out. So again, the question is, why did we need to learn anything in our Mishnah about making an argument on behalf of somebody who makes a purchase? Shouldn't we already have known that from these other two Mishnayos? So the answer is Shrika. No, when it comes to the purchaser, we need both Mishnayos. We need both our Mishnah and we need the Mishnah in connection with buying a courtyard. Because the Yashmi in Hasam Gabi Rishos Harabim, because if we only had the teaching when it comes to Rishos Harabim, the Imor Konis Lato Shalohu, that a person says that they can put because we can say on behalf of the purchaser that the person who put up these extensions, these porches, etc., these balconies, that they did it by moving their property line back. That really their property line should be at the edge of where their balconies extend. And so therefore they really own that land. Inami achuli achul b'nei rishos harabim gabe. Or maybe the public was mochel. And Tosfos explains how would they be mochel. So achuli gabe, perish Zion Tove Ha'ir, that 7 of the best people in the city, 7 basically appointed agents of the city, B'mamad Anshe Ha'ir, that are set up by the people of the city, Shaharush Rishus Biyadam, that they have permission, Kida Amar Perak Basra the Megillah, as we saw at the end of the of Megillah, the Kavan Deleka Lechochad B'derech Ella Porta, and because everybody only has a little interest in the in trying to protect the extension into the Rishos Harabim, they're even more likely to be lenient on allowing an overhang over the Rishos Harabim. So as a result, that's maybe we could say that it's only in that situation of al hacha lo, but not when it comes to our case. In our case, we would say that no, the person is a private person. He doesn't want to allow anybody else to put it up there. And so the Iyashmin and Hacha. And if we only had our case, if I had just this Mishnah, maybe since the other person involved is an individual, in our case, the other guy's an individual, Ema Piyuse Paise, maybe they came to the guy was able to satisfy him and they were able to come to an agreement. Inami achuli achil gabe, or maybe he was mochel, he waived his rights. Aval rabim man payas, it's such a pain to go to the what is it called, to get a variance, to City Hall. It's such a pain to go to City Hall. Uman shavik, who's going to give him the right? Amalo, maybe we would say that case is different. So Trika, therefore we need both of them.
So now, here with the public, they were in the case, for instance, that you mentioned, Tosfos. So the public allowed this individual to have his property extend over his.
That's what we're going to. That's what we learn in that Mishnah. Again, the second Mishnah is on Daf 60a. We're going to have a Samach and Aleph that we're going to say that in that situation, if you buy a courtyard, and it has a chazaka, and it's already been 3 years, even though ordinarily, if you come into my property and live there for 3 years, you cannot just say, I've been living here for 3 years, I own it. You have to say that I bought it from you, that I gave it to you as a present, that you inherited it. You have to make some kind of claim on it. However, when it comes to this purchaser, we will say you don't have to make a claim. We'll make the claim for you. All you have to do is be able to show that there's 3 years of occupation. Okay,
But
so
what are
that
we talking about this extension from the balcony?
yeah, so the extension, the problem is that the extension appears to go into the public thoroughfare.
Right.
And so as a result, the public owns that. You don't have a right to just go into the public thoroughfare and build something. So the city would have the right to say you have to take down that. Yeah, it's built over it. You have to take down that balcony. So the question is does the city have the right to do that? Now, ordinarily, the city would have the right to do it unless you can make a claim that the city sold you the rights or that the city waived for you the rights or whatever, but you would have to make a claim associated with it. You can't just say, well, my balcony's been there for 3 years. That's not enough. But here, if you in fact were the purchaser, we will make the claim that either the city waived the rights or the city sold the rights. And so therefore you were allowed to keep it because you're a purchaser and you don't necessarily have the evidence to make the claim. So we're going to make the claim for you. So that's what we're learning here.
What's that called? Modern property rights, where you have thoroughfare through someone's yard and you always use it.
An easement.
An easement.
Yes. Okay. Harehu b'chezkaso. I'm very proud of myself because it's definitely a senior moment for me to forget that. All right. Harehu b'chezkaso. So again, we say that the dovecote gets to stay there because it has a chazaka. So 1 second, how can we even say this? Don't we have this principle of ein chazaka, that there's you can't get a right, you can't retain a right to cause damage. So Rav Mari Amar Bakutra. No, Rav Mari explains, and we saw this just a few moments ago. Rav Mari explains, no, that's talking about with smoke. Razvid Amar Bavesakise. Razvid says, no, that's talking about a bathroom. That's why. And so that's the story. So as a result, we say that you can potentially get a chazaka. Again, subject to Rav Yosef's comment before of you can't get a chazaka from somebody who is particularly sensitive. Presumably, you have to know their sensitivities in order for that chazaka not to happen. All right. Napol hanimsa. Now we actually have this Mishnah, which will lead to one of the more famous exchanges in the Gemara that we'll have in a moment. This Mishnah may not really belong here because this Mishnah is dealing with where you find a chick, and of course finding things. That was what Bava Metzia was all about. But nonetheless, let's take a look and see what it says. Nipol, but obviously it's here because we're talking about dovecotes. So Nipol hanimsa miso chachamisha ama. If you find a fallen bird, meaning it's a bird that is unable to fly, it's a young a chick, harehu shel bal hashovech, then it belongs to the owner of the dovecote because it's close to the dovecote. It's within 50 amos. It almost certainly fell from that dovecote. So chutz mechamishin amma, but if it's more than 50 amos away, harehu shel motzao, then the finder gets to keep it. Finders keepers, losers weepers. Nimsa bein shnei shovachot. What happens if it's between two dovecotes? Karov l'zeh shelo, karov l'zeh shelo. Whoever is closer, that's who it belongs to. Mechsa shneim yochloku. But if it's exactly 50-50, meaning if it's exactly between the two dovecotes, and the dovecotes could be closer than 50-50, but if they're exactly between two dovecotes, then the owners have to split it. Okay, so remember that we just dealt with a chick that was literally on the borderline. One leg in one side, one leg in the other, because it's going to be very relevant to us.
Sword and you split it in half.
Yeah, exactly, like a baby, and you split it in half with a sword. Yes, but here we can actually do the value. Shlomo HaMelech, didn't, exactly. Thank God we could do the value. All right, so Amar Rav Chanina, Rov v'karov holchen achar rov. When it comes to these two principles of majority and proximity, we follow the majority. V'aval gav deruba deoraisa v'korba deoraisa. Even though both of these principles can be found in the Torah, nonetheless, majority is superior. So we're going to challenge this concept, the Rabbi Hanina statement. But let's just remind ourselves there are two different psukim. One in Shmot, Parak of Gimel Pasuk Bet, where we say Acharei Rabim Lahatos, that you should follow the majority, you should lean towards the majority. That shows the principle of majority. And when it comes to Egla Arufa, which we'll talk about in a moment, in Dvarim, Parak Kaf Aleph, it talks about following, you go after the closer city.
The city that's good, right?
The city that's closer, exactly. So now we're going to challenge Reb Chanina's rule 3 times. We'll see 2 of the challenges today, and then we'll I'm sorry that I didn't scroll. We'll leave the 3rd challenge, God willing, for tomorrow. So challenge number 1. Masif Rabbi Zera, 1 second. V'haya ha'ir hakrova el hachalal. When we talk about the Egla Rufa, we say that you go to the nearest this town that's closest to the slain person, so to the cadaver, va'aval gav, to the murdered individual, va'aval kav deika achuriti the nefishimi. The implication is even if there's another town that's larger, so b'deleka. So the Gemara says that no, we're dealing with there's no other town in the area. So as a result, this is the only town it really could be. The lezel basar druba de alma. But 1 second, maybe you should go about the rest of the world. There are way more people in the rest of the world than in any city in any place. So b'yoshev is bein haharim. So we're dealing with an isolated situation. So that basically Rabbi Hanina is saying that when the Torah says that you follow the closest city, it's actually saying that you follow the majority. But when the city is all by itself, then don't worry about where the majority of people come from. Focus on the closest town. Okay, so
you go to the closest town anyway, right?
That's what's remarkable about this understanding, right? That according to Rabbi Hanina, he would understand the psukim in the Torah as essentially saying, no, really, we're supposed to follow the majority. The Torah is just telling us that when there is no likelihood that it's coming from the majority of the rest of the world, so then you follow the closest city. But in fact, if there were 2 cities nearby, one that was much larger and one that was much smaller, it would seem from this Gemara and this Gemara alone that Rabbi Hanina would say that even though the larger city is actually a little further away, you should follow the larger city. Okay, so that was challenge number 1 that Rabbi Hanina has overcome. Challenge number 2 is, of course, from our Mishnah, and that is why this statement is brought here. So Tanan, Nipol animtza b'toch hamishim ama, harehu shel bala shovech, va'afal gav de'ika achrina denafish minei. The implication is that even though there's a larger shovach that's maybe just a little bit further away, we're going to follow the one that's closer. So the Gemara answers, bidaleka. No, we're talking about where there isn't one. Well, ihachi, if that's true that there isn't one, well, ema seifa, what about the second case of our Mishnah? Chutz mechamishin ama harehu shel motzao. When it comes to the case that if you're more than 50 amos away, it goes to the one who found it. V'idaleka, and if there's no other shovach in the area, v'ademahu nafal. It certainly fell from this one. So hakabamayaskinan b'midadeh. We're talking about a bird that doesn't fly, but rather only hops. So the point is that until now, maybe we were talking about a baby bird that could also fly, but no, now we're talking about a bird that only hops. Tamar of Ukva Barchama Kol Hamidada Ain Midada Yoter Makamishin. Any bird, any hopper, any bird that hops, it only will not hop more than 50 amot. So, boy, Rabbi Yirmiyah asked this very important question, which of course is going to get him thrown out of the Beit Midrash. Raglo achas b'toch hamishin ama, v'raglo achas chutz hamishin ama mahu. What happens if the animal is one leg within 50 amos and one leg outside 50 amos? Now, remember, in our Mishnah, we answered the question about what happens if one foot is is closer to this one, and 1 foot is closer to that one, and we split it exactly. So Ma, what's the law? So
What's the difference? Well, how is this question different?
yes, exactly. You're asking a great question. And from this, Rabbi Yirmiyah was thrown out of the Beit Midrash. They ejected Rabbi Yirmiyah from the Beit Midrash. So why did they eject Rabbi Yirmiyah from the Beit Midrash? So let's take a look. What?
Because we already
No. Well, we didn't answer the question, because how do you split from that? If you were to say split it, so what's the split? Split it between the finder and the okay, interesting. That's not where we're gonna go, but I wonder whether some Rishon may say that, but I don't think so.
But split the value. It says yachloku, right?
Yeah, yachloku is when, remember, that situation wasn't when it was when it was 50 amos from both. It was 2 shovachs were 60 amos from each other, and now you found the chick 30 amos from each of them with 1 leg in each side. Okay, that was the case in our Mishnah. So now this case is you found it, and it's 50 on the 50-yard line, 50 exactly 50 amos away. So now Tosfos says va'alha valda afkuhu l'Rebbe Yirmiyah b'Mevi Drasha ein lefarish mishum debai milsa delo shchicha. Don't say that he was thrown out because he was asking an uncommon question. That's not the right answer, klal, at all. Dehechi itrame derugel akat to chamishin v'rugel akat chutz chamishin. That, and we were saying, how could it be that there was a chick that would have 1 leg within 50 and 1 leg without b'tzimtzum in an exact amount? That even our own Mishnah talks about this. That we even have this principle.
Yeah, that's it. They split it.
Correct. So now Tosfos is going to answer, why did they kick him out? Because right here, you're wondering that. Therefore, Rabbeinu Tam says the following. This is why they threw him out. Mishum de medade eno medade klal. Yoter mechamishim ama. Because when we say that it hops, and we say that the limit is 50 amos, the rabbis gave a measurement. That is the right measurement. We don't question that measurement. Afilu raglo achat, that even if it was 1 leg out, that would indicate it did not come from this shovach, meaning that the answer to the question of what happens in Rabbi Yirmiyah's situation is that of course it belongs to the finder, because it is not within 50 amos, and it has to be fully within 50 amos, because the rabbi said that the amount that a hopping bird will hop is 50 amos, and so as a result, it cannot be that we make absolute rules. Sometimes in life, the rabbis needed to make very clear lines. And if you question those lines, well, then that's going to be a problem. All the measurements of the chachamim are meant to be precise. And as a result, if you come to question them, well, then you deserve to be thrown out of the Beit Midrash. And so,
but it wasn't exactly 50. Only half of the animal was within 50. Right?
Yes, but the point is that once you cross that 50 yard line, the 50 amos line, once you cross that 50 amos line, so then it cannot be. The rabbis are saying, by definition, it must not have come from the shovach, because it went further. The rabbis set a limit. They said the limit is 50 amos. You are now questioning the limit of the rabbis. With that, we're going to say that deserves ejection, because we don't want, again, if the rabbis say that something that the measurement of the amount that you make a bracha on is the size of an olive, the bracha achrona is the size of an olive, well, then it's the size of an olive. You can't change that, because that will fundamentally undermine the entire engagement in which we're endeavoring. So this
bird is walking, though. It's hopping. And now
Correct.
and then it continues to hop, and it hops one more amma, another.
Nah, that's the
few
point.
inches.
That's
The
it.
rabbis
The
forbid.
rabbis said that it's not going to happen, and that and as a result, birds don't hop that far, and so as a result, baby birds don't hop that far, and so as a result, if the bird is actually more than 50 amas away, it must not have come from that particular shovach. All right. So we have one more challenge to Rabbi Hanina coming, but for that challenge, stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Have a fabulous, fabulous day, everybody.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.